Welcome to Divorce View Talk Show. Hello, I'm Joanie Winberg, certified human behavior consultant, divorce mentor, and founder of GettingAlongSolutions.com. It's always a pleasure to do this show together with my co-host, Rosalind Sedacca. Hello, Roz.
Hi, Joan. Great to see you again, and great to see our viewers. My name's Rosalind Sedacca. I'm a divorce and parenting coach, founder of the ChildCentered Divorce Network, and author of How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce. I'm very excited to have you joining us today because we have an expert with us who really knows her stuff and is going to be able to give us a lot of insights about the divorce and parenting equation. And it's especially important because this month, as you may know, January, is International Child-Centered Divorce Month. And it's a time when we especially focus on what parenting and divorce means and how we could do best by our children before, during, and long after divorce. So I'm going to introduce you to Adina Laver. And why don't we let Adina tell us about herself?
Absolutely. Welcome, Adina.
Hi, Joanie. Hi, Rosalind. Thank you so much for having me on tonight as a guest. And it is really exciting to be here in the middle of Child-Centered Divorce Month, the International Child-Centered Divorce Month. And, you know, as you both know, and as we all know, how important it is in this process that with everything that goes on, that really placing children first and children at the center of our thinking and our consciousness is the most important thing that we can do. So I'm really honored to be here. And in terms of who I am, so I am a divorce and relationship coach, and I work with people who are at the stages of either considering what their next step is in their relationship or pursuing it. And really the goal is to find a healthy path to a more positive future. I'm the founder of Divorce Essentials, which is a company that supports people going through this process, both through coaching and through programs that we have, and author of The Divorce Companion, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And I'm really glad to be here tonight.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. And we have a really interesting topic, one we haven't touched upon very much, and it's actually called Overcoming Your Biggest Obstacle, which is fear. And I talked to you a little bit about this, Adina, and you've got some really good tips that you can share with our listeners about that big obstacle, fear, because it is a scary situation.
It is a really scary situation. And when I talk about fear, one of the first things I like to explain to people is, you know, why fear paralyzes us so much. So there's no doubt that even considering divorce or going through it is really scary. There's no doubt about that. It is for everybody. But it's really interesting also to think about why fear paralyzes us and what actually happens to us in the process. And without too much of a science lesson, one of the things that happens is that fear affects us in a part of our brain that's really the most primal part of our brain. Our brain evolved over time. And what it does is, way back when we really had to worry about our survival, it was much safer to assume that that thing we thought might be a tiger in the bush really was, and then maybe be wrong, than to assume, nah, I don't think it is, and then find out that it really was. And our brain very much has been wired evolutionarily to always assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we been in any situation and we can think of all the horrible things that could happen, all the things that could go wrong? And it's because our brain is actually wired to do that from early days about how we stay safe. So if we think about divorce and all the things that we can imagine for our children, for our finances, for where we're going to live, it's very easy to come up with an extremely long list of things that could happen, and we're always going to imagine the worst, producing a tremendous amount of fear. So I think the first piece of it, Joanie, I really wanted to share is that we feel like all these terrible things might happen and we're afraid of them, and that's actually wired into our brains to think that way, but we don't have to follow every fear that we think of. And so I want to pause here for a moment, but I think it is important to think about what do we do considering that that's how our brain is operating.
And because when you think about it, in any situation, but of course divorce is a huge challenge, and we don't know what to expect. We're, you know, all of a sudden it's going to be a whole different situation for the children, for finances, maybe your house. so forth. So there's a lot of unknowns. Will I be going to court? You know, what's going to happen? You know, your mind can just really, I call, run amok with you because it's so much of the unknown.
And then add to that the stories we hear from well-meaning friends and family and neighbors and newspaper headlines, which accelerates the fear. Because just because your cousin had a horrific divorce doesn't mean yours has to follow in the same path. But that's what happens. We start hearing horror stories, and we also get herded into certain beliefs because of other people, and that's very dangerous.
Just a side note of that, Ross, I remember my first time being pregnant. I heard all those horror stories. So it's like you don't want to listen to that either. So this is one of those same situations is, you know, take it with a grain of salt for somebody's horror stories and realize that you are unique and different. But I just had to throw that in there because that was something I thought, oh, yes, I've heard those horror stories. But Adina, what would you say would be some points, some tips to maybe deal with that fear? How can we help?
Yeah, so there are a couple things I want to raise, and one of them really has to just jumps right off of what you were both saying is somebody else's story is not going to be our story, and to recognize that we actually have control and power in that. You know, how reactive we become, how much we allow our fear to control us, how much we allow our anger to control us, and things like that is a matter of choice that we have. And you know, I know in the role as coaches is that some of that is helping people to understand that part of our friend's story or our sister-in-law's story or the people that we hear about has to do with, you know, how did everybody choose to navigate in that situation, and by making conscious choices to not be consumed by that fear or those anger or things like that, that we actually can have a really different story. So I think that's just firstly really important to know. The second thing is, in terms of the fear, one of the questions that I ask my clients that I find to be really important is I have them say, you know, what is the worst thing that could happen here? And of course, you know, we can come up with pretty bad stories. You know, what is the worst thing that could happen here? And then I say, how likely is that to really happen? What's the evidence that you have from your past experience, either with that partner or with the other players or in those situations, that that worst case scenario is likely to happen? And what I find really amazing is that most of the time people say, well, that's not really likely to happen because that hasn't been the way they've behaved in the past, or there isn't really strong evidence. So even though our mind could create the fear and create the story, when we stop and look at it, there's not always so much evidence to show that that thing is likely to really happen.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, if they really break it down and think about it. Excellent point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important piece to, you know is let's check our fears against reality.
One time I actually had a client who kept focusing on everything that was going wrong, and finally at one point I said, you know, this is good. We got everything out of the way now that's going wrong. So let's just be happy we got that. Now let's focus on what's going right. And it really just, there was a little bit of silence there because all of a sudden her thinking was shifting and she wasn't used to focusing on what was going right. But I helped to try to let it go and help her feel like she said, all right, I got it out of my system, it's gone, and now let's focus on what's right. And you can, it's really a new skill for people to think that way, because if you've been in that environment growing up and people are always thinking of the toxic or what's wrong, or even just like you said, people in general around us without any harmful intentions are always thinking about what's going wrong. So it's hard to break it sometimes.
Absolutely, Joanie. And what you just said is the next point I was going to come to, so I'm really glad you raised it, and you called it shifting, and sometimes I like to use the word that says reframing. And what that means is that we take the way we've been thinking about something. It's almost like if we go to a gallery and we're looking at a piece of artwork and we stand at one angle to that piece of artwork and then we shift, or if like it's one of those holograms or things like that, and we shift our position and suddenly it looks really differently, or we notice things that we didn't notice before. And in a situation like divorce, where there is so much going on and it's so complex, it's always the case that if we shift our position a little bit, that we can see something that we really didn't even know was there before. I like to think of it as the miracles. But in looking at the questions of, even something like, I may not get to spend as much time with my children. I'm used to having my children full time. And that's a really huge fear for a lot of parents. And then when you start the conversation of, what are some of the things you have found that you haven't been able to do for the last 10 years? Because it's really difficult working and being a parent and all those things, and suddenly the opportunities arise of, gee, I might be able to go out with friends more, or I might be able to take that class that I didn't take before. So we can choose how to see the world. We can choose how we're going to view what's in front of us. And when we're talking about fear, sometimes that taking the step to the left or the step to the right and looking at that situation through a slightly different lens or from a different angle can help us see that maybe it's not all bad and it's not all scary, but there really is something positive there.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an important point. And I remember when I was in the early years after the divorce, how much I really valued that special time I had knowing that my son was with his father. So I felt that he was safe and secure in that environment, and I could pursue being single, going out, dating, having fun with friends. And it was really refreshing because when I was a married mom, I didn't have as much alone time and me time. So it became time that I really cherished and valued. And then when my son was back, missing him was wonderful, and it became fresh and new, enjoying parenting him again in those intervals. And that this was just a few days on and off, but I always felt that it worked very successfully for me, and I was very grateful for having that.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you didn't have the guilt, and you were able to honor yourself and know that you deserve that time.
Exactly, because it was something unexpected I hadn't had for the first 11 years of my son's life, and then when the divorce took place, it was a new dynamic, and I came to actually appreciate it and enjoy it.
Adina, you mentioned something before about freezing, flee, or fight. We might have been touching upon some of that already, but those are some points that you wanted to share with us. Would you want to kind of pull that all together?
Yeah, and this goes back to that wiring I was talking about early on evolutionarily. And what would happen to us, way back when, I'm going to kind of go back in our evolutionary time here, is that if we came up against something that we were scared of, an enemy, because it really was about survival then, we had this thing that if we felt like we could conquer the enemy or we had a good chance at it, we likely were to fight, right, and to try to win. If we felt like we could get away and we felt more vulnerable, we might dash forward and flee. But if we really got taken over by terror, by really not having any clue what to do, not feeling we could run, not feeling we could fight, we literally would just freeze in place and get totally stuck. And I feel like for a lot of people going through divorce that that's what happens too. That it's very scary to see what's on the other side. It's very scary to go up against that. What if I can't figure out how to support myself? Or, what if my kids do get really upset and angry? What if all of those things? And I feel like I can't do anything about that. But there isn't really any running either because we have obligations and commitments and children and family and all those things. So what's really common in divorce is to just freeze and get stuck and not be able to move forward. And one of my clients just shared with me a book that she was reading that's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Mm-hmm. And I can see you're both nodding your heads that you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And that idea that it's coming up against our fears and going forward and realizing in that we're stronger than we thought we were, that we're wiser than we thought we were, that we have more resources than we thought we did. And one of the real blessings I find for people when they go through divorce in a really conscious way is that they do bring in a circle of support. They do allow people to help them. They don't go it alone. And, I find that when people open themselves up to support in one way or another, be that, friends that really can be supportive in a helpful way, or sometimes people we don't know all that well who can come in, professionals who really do want to help get the best information to us, coaches and things like that. When we open up and allow a circle to support, that we find that we can do things that we really didn't know we could do, and that we can actually manage them well. And one of the greatest blessings I find is when I'm working with somebody who's feeling really vulnerable, but through our work together and through stepping toward the things that they fear, how they come out feeling so much stronger and more resilient and able to navigate.
Absolutely. It's just amazing, and I think we probably have all been through this when those once shared to-do things, especially around the house, become maybe your responsibility. And I remember, you know, having those things that maybe your former used to do, and I'm thinking, okay, I've never done this, but I can do this. And you know, I had the supportive neighbors who were just very helpful. And I said, you know, this might be a silly question, but I'm trying to fix this. I feel as I can do it. Can you walk me through it? And just doing things like that, I really built the confidence of, you know, just doing things myself. I mean, I fixed a door handle today. My son came home, tore it off the door by mistake, so I went to the hardware store, fixed it, and did it. And you know, so that's the confidence that you build when you first get divorced. I probably would have froze, you know, so you can see how you build that confidence over years, and you think, you know what, I can do this. Step one says screwdriver you need. Okay, you know, so it's doing that, you know, so good for you. I love that, and helping women identify the freezing stage.
And in coaching, I call those the gifts. If you look for the gifts, you'll find that there are amazing things that come out of life situations. If you look for them, and if you're grateful for them, and if you know how to step forward and appreciate them rather than feeling like a victim and just dwelling on what shouldn't be and what is wrong in your life, because there are wonderful gifts like more self-esteem and more self-confidence and the ability to test the waters in new areas that you may not have done before in your traditional marriage. So there's wonderful things that you can take out of the situation if you're in that mindset, and look at it as a blessing in your life rather than something that you regret.
Absolutely. I want to take this time, Adina, to have people know about your program called the Divorce Companion. So, and then,
Right.
Roz, I'd like you to talk about a little bit about child-centered divorce again, but tell us about that, Adina.
Thanks, Joanie. And it was funny, as Roz was talking and you were talking, I was thinking, you know, here we are as a circle of support, right? And Roz has written this book, How to Tell the Children About Divorce, to kind of give us some insight. How do we do that? You know, you work with families about their communication. And one of the things that I've done in my work, and Roz was part of it, as was more people as a team of professionals, was creating, I'm just sort of holding it up here, the Divorce Companion, that is a multimedia program really designed. The whole idea is that nobody should have to go through it alone, and that's why it's called the Companion. The best description I've heard anybody say of it is that it's like a torch that's like lighting the way through some place that feels very dark and unknown and scary. And you know, when you're even considering the possibility of divorce, beginning to navigate it, there are so many things to think about. There's your children, of course. There's the legal pieces, there's the financial pieces, there's the relationships with friends and family. It cuts across everything in our lives. And so the Divorce Companion was really designed to support that journey and to introduce audio and video and exercises to help us figure out how to navigate in this unknown place. And so there's 11 different audios that go with different sections of the guidebook, and then planning guides and exercises to really help say, you know what, I can figure this out. I can figure out how to do this. I can figure out the financial pieces, and who are the resources that I need, and what do I need to get together, and what do I need to know that I don't even know about, and you know, what does it mean to put my children first? What are the healthy things? What are not the healthy things? How can I work with the other parent, my children's other parent, through this? So and how can I take care of myself? You know, it's so important to take care of yourself. So the Divorce Companion is this program that was really created so that nobody should have to walk alone in this, and that whether you could afford lots of help or you couldn't afford lots of help, that you would have a companion walking beside you.
Excellent. Great idea.
I just want to highly endorse the program. I saw Adina go through the entire process working with wonderful colleagues, and it is such a well-written, such a well-presented vehicle, resource for people that I do highly recommend it. Every facet of it is very high consciousness and filled with details and information and checklists and guides, so you really can take it step by step through the whole process. So I was honored to be part of it, and I do feel it's an excellent product.
It's great. It's great. And also want our listeners to be reminded of this month of January. What's so special about January, Roz?
Together for International Child-Centered Divorce Month, a special web page where divorce experts around the world are contributing free gifts, free advice and resources, ebooks, videos, audios, all kinds of information, coaching programs that people who can take advantage of, whether you're facing divorce or whether you're along after divorce. There's information of value on all sides, and Adina is one of our valued contributors as well. And we invite anyone who knows anyone who's in the divorce world, or who is contemplating divorce or doing divorce and wants some extra support, to take advantage and go to the website, and all you have to do is click on the links and get as many of those gifts and resources and services as you're interested in. So the website is divorcedparentsupport.com/ebook. That's divorced with an ED, divorcedparentsupport.com/ebook. And just enter your email address. You'll get my ebook on post-divorce parenting first, and then you'll get a link to the entire page with all the other wonderful gifts. We have very caring professionals who are on board, who are making a difference and want to help you, and it's available through January, so take advantage of it while you can.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roz. So, Dina, let's pull it all together. We're talking about fear. What would you like to leave our listeners with? Some tips that they can take away. We talked about it a lot, so maybe we'll boil it down to a few good tips here.
Yeah, I think there's something, I wish I could remember the quote exactly, but I think there's this one quote, and I've had my clients quote it back to me from Eleanor Roosevelt, that sometimes it's our coming up against and facing our greatest fear is the gateway to really receiving our greatest gifts. And it's not exact, but it's something like that. And it really is that encouragement that, you know, things are scary and it doesn't make them insurmountable. Going through them is what will reveal parts of ourselves that we haven't yet truly appreciated or discovered. So I invite people into that, and I invite you to gather your companions, whether it be the divorce companion or other companions for your journey, and go towards what you feel afraid of, because you will come out stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. And to have that vision of what's on the other side, I think all three of us can really say that go through that fear, hang in there, because on the other side, I look at it as a whole new life. I don't know. It's just a real, like a paradise or a fun, or just it's just a whole new life on the other side, and you'll never reach it if you can't get through the fear.
It can be a better future for you if you embrace it and take advantage of all of these tips, and reach out to services like Adina's and mine and Joanie's, who can coach you in the arenas that you need. Adina, I think we need to remind people how to access the Divorce Companion.
Sure. Thanks, Rosalind. They can access it directly through divorcecompanion.com. And there's a video, there's a sample section that they can download, a sample audio that they can download, the table of contents. So there's lots of information so you can see what it's about. And it's www.divorcecompanion.com.
And how do they find you if they want your services?
And if they'd like to find me, down on the screen below me, it's Divorce Essentials with an S at the end, .net. The Divorce Companion is also available through my site, so you can reach it either way, divorceessentials.net.
Well, this has been great. Thanks, Adina, so much for being on the show. And as always, Roz, it's such a pleasure to do this together. And Adina, we certainly want to have you back as the year progresses, and any new tips and tools that you have, please let us know. We'd love to help you share them.
Great. Thank you, Joanie, and thank you, Roz. It's been wonderful to be here and honored to be part of the month.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And also tune in to divorceview.com. That's where you will see Roz's tools to help support you, as well as my own through communication. And also you'll get to view this show again, and also all of our other shows. We actually have done over 70 shows, and so it's amazing how much we've done and how much information is really out there for you. So thanks again, ladies. And then also to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Have a great week. We'll see you then.